Welcome to the Business Finance Matters podcast. Over the next 15 minutes, we're going to tackle some of the topics that we get asked about on a regular basis so you business owners can get a better understanding of what it is that you're probably dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Let's get on with it.
Here we go then, Dave. Another of our gripping Finance in 15.
Gripped.
Are you?
Yeah.
Sure?
Absolutely.
Good. So, look, we've literally probably got tens of people now watching us. Maybe hundreds, who knows? And I think when we met recently, we were talking about what is the business finance intermediary. And I think we nicely explained what that was about. But it dawned on me, and I think this is a good subject for us to tackle now, actually getting finance is more about than just making the application, isn't there? There's a lot that really needs to be considered before any business, whether they go via an intermediary or direct. So shall we call it preparing for finance? Yeah. So just talk to me a little bit about what that actually means in your mind.
Yeah, I think for me, bearing in mind we have spoken about the importance of using a business finance professional, and their role is manifold. But one of the roles that they will play is to make sure that before any application for finance is made, that application is supported by the relevant bits of financial information that all lenders need. And there's no secret here that depending on what type of finance is needed, there's going to be a range of financial information for obvious reasons to be provided before we can even consider making an application. So there's a certain period, if you want, due diligence that we have to undertake, and most business owners will probably be aware of the basics. For example, any type of lending, the lender needs to make sure that there's an affordability. There's no point putting a loan in place, for example, and that business can't afford to make the repayments on that. So from a layman's point of view, if I'm going to lend you, Trevor, 100 quid, are you going to be able to afford to pay me back? In fact, you still owe me 100 quid. But the point being is the preparation for it is very important. And again, the skill sets around that are fairly simple to a certain degree. Every business should be preparing its annual accounts, for example.
So I'm thinking then, you're a big rugger player, as you know. Anybody,
massive.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Not so much. You're a bit more of a big spectator. But I'm sort of thinking, would a good analogy be then, rather than just turning up on the weekend to, run out with your 14 friendly mates who are going to do all sorts of things to you, some legal, some not. You have to train, don't you? Yeah. Is that a sort of a reasonably
I think it's a good analogy.
You've got to get yourself match fit, haven't you?
Well, yeah, and also if you use the analogy of rugby, there are certain positions within that team that require.
Careful now.
But they do require a different type of preparation.
Yeah.
For example, if you're a big ugly forward like I used to be, there's a different type of preparation to being someone like one of our ambassadors, Rory Underwood, who was slightly more svelte looking and had legs on him that went very, very fast. So their level of preparation would be different to someone who's perhaps had a different position on the rugby field. Same with businesses, depending on how big they are and depending on how complicated they are, whether it's a group, for example, a group of subsidiaries, whatever it is, that needs to have a certain amount of financial information available. Then yes, the preparation is similar. We need to make sure that everything within that business is prepped and ready, and that comes from a range of information which we've just touched on. So, be it the annual accounts, for example.
So, would it be fair then that lenders can only base a lending decision on the historical situation? They don't really tend to look ahead, do they? Or
well, again, it depends. It's horses for courses in terms of what we're trying to do here. I think yes, fundamentally, the past is very important for lots of reasons. The business needs to be showing or demonstrating that there's a level of ability to move forward and grow. The last thing we want, and it does happen, and it's very important again that we make this point very clear, that when we go in and meet with the business, and it has happened to me, you've gone in to see a company that's looking for some kind of working capital, and when you've done your initial due diligence, you've actually recognised the last thing this business wants is any other type of any form of debt, because all it's going to do is going to cripple it going forward.
Sure.
So ultimately, yes, we need to make sure that our eyes are wide open. However, the future is also important. So the lender wants to know what's this facility going to be used for.
So it's interesting. You said something about accounts and financial statements. I would imagine, well, I probably know, but I'd be interested what you've got to say. The importance of making sure that company returns are filed on time, annual accounts are filed within the time limit. What else would needs to be in order, for the want of a better expression?
Well, first of all, every business should, and if they haven't, they must have some kind of accountancy professional behind them.
Yeah.
I don't know many, if any, businesses that I work with that don't have an accountant. And then we need to work out what role that accountant is playing. Again, the accountancy role is quite varied depending on the size of the business, etc. But there are basic things that every business needs to fulfill, typically on an annual basis. That is the basics. The financials are definitely annually, especially if you're an incorporated company. They need to be, put to Companies House every 12 months.
Yeah.
If they're not, there are certain penalties that can come as a consequence of that, which won't help when we're going to look for funding for that business.
So I suppose what you're saying then, as a potential lender, without really doing too much, by the time the application hits me, I can actually get a fair understanding of that business. Let's be honest, it's being operated and managed properly.
Correct.
Because if you're going to be late with that, or shall I even say some bounce statement items on the bank statement, that's probably not going to happen. And I suppose that the business owner probably doesn't think about that too much. They go, well, it doesn't matter if I'm a couple of days late doing that, or so it's almost like getting the right mindset, really, and getting the business to follow that a strict sort of regime. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. And look, every business has a challenge, regardless of what size and what level of how old that business is. There's always going to be something in the past and in the future that's going to crop up. And again, the role that I would play, or the role that we would need to make sure is being undertaken before we get to the point of introducing it to a lender, is if there are any issues, or there have been any issues, that they're highlighted. Because the last thing a lender wants to see is issues within those financials that will ultimately, or maybe, create a decline when we're going forward with that process.
So that's interesting. So if there are, shall we say, a few late payments or something like that, are you saying it's not necessarily the end of the world? Is it more a case of saying, okay, well, look, that's the situation, that's the history, we can't change it, can we?
Absolutely.
Moving forward. But then coming back to the intermediary role, it would probably be your job to explain that to a potential lender.
Yeah, and I've seen situations where, if we're using the bank statements as an example, where there have been, let's call them bounce payments, we need to understand how those bounce payments occurred. And in some cases, they're totally legitimate reasons why. And I've also come across businesses that I work with where those bounce payments weren't their fault. It was the bank's fault. There was something that happened within that particular day or on that particular moment where the overdraft was in place, or something happened. But the point I'm making is, whatever it is, it's sort of, it's a bit like, we're doing a proper spring clean here. We're getting underneath the belly of the company. If we find things within the business that we think needs to be addressed, providing they can be addressed and there's a valid reason for it, then lenders again will accept that as being part and parcel of just being a business these days.
And that's quite tricky, isn't it? Because I think, you're an experienced operator. I've been kicking around for a little while, as you can probably tell. Finance is not an easy subject for people to talk about sometimes, isn't it? And if there have been a couple of hiccups or whatever, again, that's difficult. That's difficult to talk about, isn't it? So, what sort of reaction do you get when you ask, let's be quite frank, some fairly pertinent questions? Do you get, do people sort of put the defences up and go, well, nothing to do with me, Gov, or do you find that?
No, I think the most important thing is, in my role, and certainly I speak on behalf of other guild members, is you need to get the confidence in that business owner of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So if we do the initial due diligence part and we are asking questions about, I note, for example, that in your financials to the year end 24, your profits dipped or your net worth was changing, or whatever it is that we're trying to get to the bottom of. I can't think of an example where someone has not, but there may be. But ultimately, the sensitivity around it's been removed, because what we're trying to say is we're here for a reason. And the reason that we're here is to make sure that your financials are in the right order, to make sure that we can move this forward. And if we do find anything within those financials that we need to address them, then we will. And the business owner will, in theory, or the accountant certainly will, as a partnership in this preparation for the financial information, will provide us with that information that is ultimately the most important part of putting together the application.
And that strikes me as interesting. You mentioned it. I don't know whether it was just your vernacular, but I know that you and many of the guild members actually go and visit
Always
the customer,
Yeah.
or the potential customer. It's not all tap on the computer screen.
Yeah.
I mean, surely that's got to be valuable because you use the word partnership, and it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe not just with the business owner, but the accountant, maybe suppliers, maybe all sorts. I mean, you're sort of really getting under the skin of these businesses, aren't you?
Yeah, the traditional values you're getting to now, even though there is technology around, and no one's afraid of technology, but technology can, in some circumstances, take away that traditional way of working. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned, if there is if there is a business that I generally believe that we can work with, then a meeting is typically always undertaken, because that relationship, that confidence building, will come as a result of us meeting the individuals. And ultimately, it is about the individuals. So we need to make sure that we are working with people that A, we can work with, and B, we can make sure that if there are any areas of the financials that we need to fully understand and get our head around, they're going to help us with that.
And do you know what's just hit me right between the eyes? You are never going to get that as a business owner if you apply direct in the moment.
Correct. And we touched on that before, haven't we?
We have. And if you think about all that we've just been talking about there, I don't know, it could take weeks, maybe take a few months before you decide collectively with your customer that they're now match fit. As we were talking about earlier,
Yes.
They're ready to get on the pitch, cross the white line, cross themselves, do whatever they do. Yeah. That's the end result, isn't it? It's not the start of the process.
Yeah.
And I do worry, and we've shared this concern before, I do worry for those businesses, and we've mentioned it when we're doing the audio podcast, where the business owner is sat there at 10 o'clock on a Friday night going, goodness me, am I going to pay the VAT bill? How am I going to pay the wages at the end of the month? Yeah. Tap. Oh, I got that email the other day from so-and-so. I could have $500,000 in 3 seconds if I pay my cards right. It doesn't feel the right process to me.
No. But, the process is pretty straightforward. We need to make sure that, the financial side to that business is up to date. And and if there are any areas which we need to focus on them, we focus on them, and that continues going forward as well.
And I think many people say banks used to give you an umbrella when it was sunny and didn't want to know when it's rain. It sort of still rings true a little bit, really. I mean, the worst time to ask for finance is when you desperately need it. It's better to go, oh, hold on a minute. And this goes back to forward planning as a business, know where you are, know what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a really important part to get over. So it's a journey, isn't it? It's not just an arrival and see where we go. Look, time's marching on, my friend. It's always good to see you. Unfortunately, literally see you these days, but
pleasure's mine.
Well, I'm glad it is, because it ain't mine. But look, you I know, doing a marvelous job out there. You do the job right, as do all the colleagues that you have in the guild. It's good to hear that you're doing it right, my friend.
Thank you very much.
On that note, we'll wrap it up.
Yep.
And I'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on this podcast. We hope it was useful. Please share, please subscribe, so we can share this content to as many business owners as we possibly can. And if there was anything we haven't covered in this particular episode, then please let us know. Drop us a line. We'll be happy to talk about it in future episodes. Thanks again.